So thanks, Renee. So I think I'm going to kick off today with a little talk about anger and ADHD, just some general stuff. And then I'd like to get into hearing about where your struggles are. Simon, I see that you've already put up. How do you think low dosages of lithium could help diminish ADHD emotional flooding? I was misdiagnosed years ago with bipolar disorder and took lithium for a year. It made me catatonic. But I'm laughing because I'm not sure why I'd want to take it again. But low dose, I'm thinking could be helpful with people with ADHD. I'm not a physician, and so I don't like to just talk about medication recommendations. That's really something that you want to talk about with your provider. Nara says, uh, my volume is off. You cannot hear me. Can you hear me? If you cannot hear me, would you let me know, please? Right away. Can you hear me? Anybody? Is my volume off? Is my volume off? Yes, you can hear me. Thank you, Bruna. Okay, yes, you can hear me, Kathleen. Thank you. I was having a little panic there. Great. All right, terrific. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the background of anger with ADHD, just a teeny bit, and then we're going to go into the specifics. The sound is a little more faint than usual. Okay, so let me get my headphones on and see if I can do it a little bit better. I'm not sure why the sound is a little more faint, but let's get these on and up, and we'll see if it's better. Is that better? Can Annie, can you let me know if you're hearing me better right now? We got a lot of people here, and I want to make sure that the sound is being transmitted. So hold on a second. That's why I get on early, to make sure everything is working. All right, hold on a second. Let's see. Okay. All right, better. You can hear me better. Let me just check and make sure that my sound is going through my headphones. The sound is good. Okay, thanks, Annie. All right, let's get started. So everybody, whether you have ADHD or not, struggles with those moments when the switch flips and suddenly there's a bubbling volcano of angry, negative emotions inside of you waiting to erupt. And before you know what's happening, you say or do things that you'll surely regret later, but you can't stop. Relationships, work, friendships, can all be negatively affected by your anger. When the amygdala, which is in the limbic system, which is in the middle part of the brain, the emotional part of the brain, becomes activated, whether it's because of fight or flight, and here we're talking about fight, right? The thinking brain, our prefrontal cortex, goes temporarily offline, and feelings rule the day. In brains with ADHD, your executive functioning skills, which are already working really hard to accomplish and maintain daily life tasks, struggle with the extra burden of effectively dealing with a rush of strong emotions. You'll react quickly with volatility instead of responding with consideration. And some of what I've been reading about the amygdala is that actually, when the amygdala activates, it's very hard to kind of get it back into place. And so we need to not just use language, but we need to use particular systems that we think about in advance to calm ourselves down. When there's an amygdala hijack, so what happens is, as Daniel Siegel says, excuse me, I'll take my little middle-aged brace off here. So this is your brain, and the amygdala is deep in here inside your brain, and when it comes out and you're having a hijack, it's basically your emotions are now ruling your thinking brain, because we have the physiological brain, the emotional brain, and the thinking brain. So our emotions come out, they're in the front seat, they're driving the car, that is us, and our thinking brain is now in the back seat, and we need to get it the reverse. In the front seat, the emotions in the back seat, and then in the trunk is our physiological brain. It's basically a VW bug. So this awareness is very important. And how do we generate this kind of awareness? Because what we have to do is notice the physiological signs when we're getting worked up. Though that is our really our primary way to lead us out of the common pattern of responding in anger or with a particular set of just really hostile actions or words. So how can we learn to notice what's happening with us when we're becoming activated? So I want you to take a minute and think for yourself, when I'm starting to get angry, what do I notice that's happening in my body? Is there a gripping feeling in my stomach? Is my heart beating? Or am I getting shallow in my breathing? Is my voice rising and kind of getting way up here? What are some signs that I could notice about myself that are a signal that I need to slow down and manage my anger? When these signs are evident, it's a clue that emotions are about to take over your thinking brain and a stop is in order. So, in my book, What Your ADHD Child Wishes You Knew, and my card deck, um, the ADHD Solution Deck for Families, I talk a lot about how to use stop, think, act. So, stop is a time apart. Using time aparts effectively depends on knowing what triggers you when you're not in a meltdown. So, when you're not in a meltdown, you think about what's triggering you. You rely on a plan and intervention to calm down, and instead of winging it in the middle of the eruption. You have some good alternatives to blowing your top or withdrawing in a fury. My secret is to go to the bathroom. I wash my hands and I breathe until I'm calmer. I would say go outside, but sometimes in the dead of winter, that's not really an option. And there's a kind of hostility in that. I'm going for a walk, you know, which may help you, but it's not engineered as such. So we want to think about we need our time apart. It takes between 15 and 20 minutes for the limbic system and the cortisol that's racing through your body to settle down. Now, for kids, it might be a little bit faster for them. They may need less time. But if we think about the amount of time that's needed to slow down, then we have different kinds of expectations for ourselves in that moment. It's very hard when you're feeling this rush of intense anger to really breathe in and actually recalibrate immediately if you live with ADHD or you live with challenges with emotional control. You know, I come from a long line of intense, passionate people. We can kind of get revved up. So, what I try to do is to have this alternative that when I'm upset, I go to the bathroom. I wash my hands, I look in the mirror, I say some kind of affirmation to myself, and I breathe. And then I leave the bathroom. Whatever's happening that's on the outside that's chaotic is still there because I'm quieting down my own volcano. And this is what we want to teach our kids with ADHD because that is a lifelong skill they'll need. So when your internal volcano is quieter, then you can move on to the think phase. Okay? So pick some self soothing activities. Post this list so you can rely on it quickly. Perhaps create a calm me down box for you and or your kids, or a calm me down playlist. I have an anger playlist on my phone. So I can sing really loud in my car and nobody can listen and I get it out. You might also have a playlist to help me kind of slow down and get in touch with my feelings and manage them. So think about these different options, maybe a coloring book, a puzzle, time with a pet. Um, there are all kinds of ways to soothe down, shooting some hoops, jumping on trampolines. Kids and adults tell me all kinds of things. So take some time and figure out what are the soothers for you and for your kids. Next, when you've taken that agreed upon time, you call the time apart, you call the stop, you take it, you come back. This is not a time for teaching. Nobody's listening. This is a time for us to take stock of our words and behavior, be accountable, and if necessary, apologize. Speak about your experience with I statements that convey feelings, not criticism. I feel frustrated when you tell me what to do because I like to figure things out for myself. Not, I feel that you're really arrogant when you tell me what to do. That is not a conversation opener. That is a conversation closer. In fact, it's a slam the door in your face conversation closer. Practice reflective listening. You know, each of you could take 5 minutes, say what you felt about the experience, reflect back, and then switch. No interventions, okay? You repeat what you hear someone say. What do you think was going on? How are you feeling now? And then here's the important question. What are we going to do next? What is the next right thing to do? And this helps us because we heard what the other person had to see, and now we're strategizing together how we're going to move on. And this is the act phase, okay? When you brainstorm ideas and problem solving, you make agreements about how to move forward, okay? This is not where you're going to review what this person did wrong and how it needs to change for the future. That occurs later. Okay, that's in a totally different phase. Maybe at night before bed when everything's calm, or maybe during a walk when people are settled and in a different place, because you're still raw even after your time apart, to be able to process and change it. It may come up naturally. That's fine. Then you can do it then, but it's not essential. Okay? You're regulating yourself, you're being accountable, and you're talking about how to move on. And the person might say, the other person, your partner or your kids, like, your friend or your boss, you say, I think, an apology would be appropriate, or I need some time to recover, but I'm ready to move on. Okay. So, so I'm going to go to the questions because I see there are lots and lots of questions, and then I'll come back because what I'd like to talk about are my 3 Ps. 3 Ps for improving emotional regulation, and I'll get to that shortly. Okay, we have a lot of comments here. Alrighty. Bruna says, one of my sons swears like normal communication, breaks things like pencils and raises his voice, gets all red when angry, but does not hurt us physically, but picks fights with every member of the family. So I think that's a really important point, Bruna. Thank you for saying that. What are your family rules around the expression of anger? What things are okay enough to say and what things are ruled out as unacceptable. You have to set those parameters, and that's why I think it's important to start with the fact that everybody gets angry. It's a natural human response. I think sometimes in our society, just like with anxiety, there's a lot of negativity about getting angry. You shouldn't get angry. Angry is bad. But that's not actually how we're wired. We are wired to get angry sometimes. We are wired to feel anxious sometimes. So instead of pushing against what's natural, what we want to do is say, okay, we get angry. Here are some ways that are okay to get angry. Here are some ways that are absolutely not acceptable. Yes, Tara, this will be available. Tiffany says, I feel like I'm always on edge. B says, my kids sure do that, but me sometimes too. Okay, I hate that feeling of being completely unable to stop it. So, Pat, I want to say something about this. As I said, am someone who has big feelings and they're intense, and I wear them all on my sleeve. You can tell if I'm happy or sad or upset. I've been a little bit better at protecting those, but it's still something that I do fairly naturally. So it's hard when we feel like we're so activated that we're what my friend Ellen says is frothy. We're frothy, and when I'm frothy, it's hard, so hard to pull myself down, put my feet on the earth, breathe, and say something like, you're frothing. Like, take a step, take some deep breaths, go to the bathroom. All I need to do is to catch myself in that moment of when I'm activated and stop or pause. It is the hardest thing that we have to do as humans, and it's really hard for kids, particularly kids with ADHD. which is why we want to reflect back to them. Your body is showing me with your clenched fists and your red face that you're really angry. This would be a good time for a pause, a stop. Or I see that your voice is very loud. Maybe this is a good time to take a deep breath or have that stop. We want to help them identify the signs of when they're activated because kids may not always know. Bobby says, my ex just says, I choose to be this way. It's all made up to her and an excuse. I'm very sorry to hear that, Bobby, and I encourage you to send your ex to this um, website um, so she can learn more about it, or to find a way to interact with her where you're not getting so provoked. Because the more that you get provoked, the more it substantiates the conversation in her head that you are a blank. Okay. Penny says, my ex says the same thing. I've given him all the resources to read and understand, but he just says, this isn't real, you choose this. So I think with people who really don't acknowledge the reality of ADHD, and in fact, I had a client who did this week, and I found it very frustrating, to be honest. I'm not sure I believe in ADHD. I really don't want to have it. And I've been fine, during COVID. I only had to take 2 online classes at a time. It was easy, some shorter little periods, like 2 classes for 7 weeks and then 2 more classes for another 7 weeks. But that wasn't actually what life was really about. All the other externals, food, activities, doing things were either eliminated or taken care of by his parents. So, if people really don't believe ADHD is a thing and they're your ex partner, I think the likelihood of you convincing them is very small. So instead, what I would do is try to work with someone to try to figure out how you can deal with them and communicate with them in a way that where you can stay regulated. Because you divorced this person for a reason. You didn't want to be with them. And so, but perhaps you have children and you're still co-parenting. And that means you're still married in a way. And that's the hardest part, I think, which is you don't really want to deal with them and they feel like they can tell you anything about how you are and who you are. So I really think setting some boundaries and finding some ways to interact with them. One couple I know could only fax. One couple, because, or maybe that's an agreement that you make, or, not emails that are just factual, not anything else. Because if you start to have heated conversations over text or email, it's not going to help anybody. And you're probably going to say or do something you regret. My partner describes the anger physiologically as starting in the abdomen and strongly surging through him into his extremities. Indeed, it sounds volcanic. And I get it, but with the pandemic, there's been no sweet reprieve as has been usual with him. Well, I hear that, Suzanne. And what I would encourage is to make some time each day where you are not together. It sounds like you need a break. Is there a family nearby that you could go to for the day, or could you just, on a weekend do a different activity? Maybe see your friends now that COVID is changing, but take some time away. We all need to recalibrate after COVID in a certain way. And for those of us who've been at home with partners a lot and kids a lot, we might need some space to help just kind of reconnect with ourselves. Gail, my parents are old school and don't even believe in it, even though my daughter has it also. That's really hard, and maybe we could do a Facebook Live on how to deal with people who don't believe ADHD is real. I'll make a note of that and we'll come back to it, and I'll put it in one of the upcoming Facebook Lives. Michelle, how can I help my son to stop lashing out and hurting us? Tonight he has bitten me, punched me, and kicked me as well. So none of these behaviors are okay, obviously. My one question I have for you, Michelle, is there a consequence? Do you have some sort of contract about how to behave? And what are the options for him when he's angry instead of doing those things? One family I know got a punching bag, and when their kids were activated like that, like it's time to go downstairs. If you do that, you'll earn this. Sometimes medication isn't quite right, or the medication's worn off, so there's nothing left. in the evening. And what you might want to consider is supplementing a, uh, um, a stimulant with a non-stimulant, because those can assist kids in the after school hours. Jim, what to do when you do finally calm down and then you reapproach the situation, they say something that makes you all angry all over again. So what happens in that case is that you haven't actually gotten enough time between the situation and the talking about the situation. Because what happens is you calm down and you come back to the situation, but it's still kind of tender. And so in that case, what I would do is have a 24-hour rule, that if something's happening where you or your partner are very activated, call a 24-hour break. And that will give you each time not just to calm down, but to really think about how you want to talk about this and move forward. And that's the time when you sit down with some reflective listening. You turn your phone or your timer on, and you each get 5 to 10 minutes. 10 minutes usually works best, where you say something, the other person repeats it, you say something else until you're finished, and then you switch. And that is as far as you can go, maybe at first, and then maybe the next day you can come back and try to problem solve. When something is that sensitive, you've got to slow down and give it the time you need to be able to discuss it without blowing your top. When the person is about to blow my fuse before it happens, how do I prevent it? It often happens over the phone when trying to get help, parents, and customer service. Lots of things set off fuses. Not hearing what I said, not understanding what I said. How do I know ahead to prevent blowing a fuse and causing the person to hang up on me? So here's the thing. I think that if you're on the phone with a parent or a customer service person and you notice you're getting upset, state that. I'm feeling really frustrated. I'm not sure you're hearing me. Can you repeat back to me what I'm saying to you? You need to know that you feel heard. That's a reasonable thing. And so if you're getting frustrated, name it. And if they're still not getting it, say, I don't know how else to say this to you, so please listen because I'm going to ask you to repeat it when I'm done. Blah, 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 blah. Can you please repeat this back to me? Okay. We had a situation recently with a telephone company, a cell phone company. I will not share its name, but essentially we bought new phones and they completely changed our plan without our consent, and the plan went up $250 a month, which was not okay. It took about 30 hours of phone calls to get things right. So you can imagine we weren't super patient. I actually got on the phone with this one guy and I said, I just want to tell you from the beginning that I'm very upset and I may not be as kind and nice as I would like to be, but this has been going on for 2 weeks and I've had no voicemail from my business phone. So that's not okay. And he said, that's not okay. And I said, you're right. And I'm not getting off the phone until you fix it. So even though I kept getting frustrated, I would say, I'm a little frustrated here. And he's like, I know. He was actually amazing. So we want to actually be human with that other person because they are human. And if you don't feel like they're understanding you or they're getting you, ask for a supervisor. If it's your parents you're talking to, say, I'm not sure this is the right time to talk. I'll call you back later. Damaging the car again. Okay, so damaging the car and things like this. I think, Michelle, my sense I'm getting is that your son might need more help than he's actually receiving, both pharmacologically and therapeutically, and as a family, because he has these huge feelings that he can't control, and he's lashing out and he's hurting you. That's not okay. That is beyond a red flag. It's like 3 red flags that something needs to be different. And he needs more help than he's getting. Ben, I have done a good job of controlling my feelings, but we recently moved to a new house and I feel like my temper's been raging in the last few weeks. So Ben, this is a great thing to bring up. When we're tired, when we're stressed, when we're overwhelmed, our weakest executive functioning skills are set off. So that might be your fuse, right? Your fuse may shorten. You might be more irritable. it's because you're flooded and you can't manage all of the input that you're trying to deal with. So in those times, I really think it's important, figure out what actually is something you can do for yourself that will settle you. Is it taking a walk every day, going for a ride, riding your bike, doing yoga or meditating or whatever it is that works for you? Some small thing that will help you calm yourself. That's really important, because when you're in a stressful situation like moving, which I think is like the number one stressful thing on the stress list, um, uh, you everything is upended. Nothing's familiar. All your routines have changed. You don't know where the silverware is. You're not sure how to, if the window doesn't open, why not? Where do you put your where do you put your coat when you come in? And so this is hard for people with ADHD because they really actually ground themselves in their routines. So be kind to yourself and try to set up some new ones. Yes, Jim, it's really hard not to go off on them. I got it. Um, okay. Um, Peter, trying to get diagnosed at 22, I was so frustrated because I had no clue why I was how I was. When I was frustrated, I took it out on anything and everyone around me. And I feel even today that I cannot control my frustrations that turn into anger because I just don't know how to control it, and this will last for days. Any help in figuring out how to maintain who I am? So, Peter, I think you actually know who you are because you're sharing it with me right here. And so I think what you want to do is to really grab on to this person. This is this insightful, self-reflecting, and honest person. Um, when you're frustrated, that what you need are specific tools to manage your frustration, and that would include things to say to yourself. I'm frustrated right now, so I need to. Or I'm frustrated right now. Anybody would be frustrated in this situation. Um, I need, maybe I need to step back or step away or call someone who can assist me. Um, yes, it's very hard, Jim. Even Jesus got angry at the temple and overturned the vendors' tables for violating his father's house. Yep, anger's been along the line a long time. Thanks, Rainey. At a Lester, when things don't go my way or as planned, or when I think I'm right, I get easily upset and blow up. So that's really interesting, because what we're talking about in this is this idea of shifting. When you have an expectation that it's going to go one way, and you have trouble adapting to how it's actually unfolding. And I think that that has to do with feeling like if it goes the way you thought it was going to go, you can predict, you have some control, and then when it doesn't, you're kind of destabilized, and that's very uncomfortable. So I think the thing that would be helpful is to figure out how to stay solid when things don't go your way. You're going to bend, you're going to straighten, you're going to bend some more, you're going to straighten. Um, because things aren't always going to go your way. And I have a client, I'm dealing with this right now. And so she's angry a lot of the time, and it's hard to live with her in the house for the 4 other members who live there. Wangari, how do you deal with frustrations cause they tend to lead to anger outbursts? So this is a great question, Wangari. So everybody gets frustrated. We all get frustrated. We're never going to eliminate frustration. But what we do want to do is have an idea of how to manage emotional regulation. Things are frustrating. So let me go into my 3 P's of improving emotional regulation. So the first one is prepare. Planning leads to success. No, you can't plan for every situation or eventuality, but you can have a basic, consistent approach for when someone is showing you that they're angry or when you yourself are triggered. Pay attention to the body clues and identify what they are, okay? So that's the first part. You're going to prepare. You're going to plan for what to do when you're frustrated. When I'm frustrated, I'm going to A, B, or C. If you want me to tell you what those are, that's a little tricky because I have my own things I do when I'm frustrated. I go to the bathroom. I get a drink of water. I might call a close friend and vent if they're open to listening, to help me. But I try really hard not to direct the frustration at the other person who's already probably also dysregulated, because then we're in just an explosion. So that's the first P, prepare. The second P is pivot. If what you're doing in a given moment to respond to your frustration or a face off isn't working, pivot and try something else. Think outside of the box and leave yourself reminders on your phone or your post-its so you don't have to come up with something when you're stressed. You want to let someone know that you mean business without yelling or escalating. How are you going to do that? To that end, you want to make sure that you've agreed to a fallback plan in your family that everyone's going to do. The aim of the agreement is collaboration toward changed family dynamics, which your kids want as much as you do. And in that agreement, you're going to have a non-cooperation clause. So what we want is to plan for those times when we're frustrated or angry or there's an explosion and how we're going to cope. In one situation, we're going to use stop, think, act. In another situation, we're going to go to the bathroom, wash our hands. And in a third situation, I'm going to put my phone and my headphones in and listen to a couple songs to help me settle. You can only decide for yourself what helps you settle down. I can't tell you what that is, but I hope that I've given enough suggestions that you have some idea. Another thing that can help you when you're frustrated is a distraction. Maybe it's looking at your phone and going on YouTube, or checking out a TikTok video, or reading the news if you like the news, or checking your Twitter feed. Some of those things can distract you, but if they upset you more, then that's not what you want to choose. So here's the third P, practice compassion. Most people, including you, feel terrible after an outburst. It's not comfortable to lose control, say mean things, and then live with yourself afterwards in a shame spiral. Practice compassion by reminding yourself that when people experience a meltdown, it's because they lack the necessary tools or personal resources in that moment to do something else. You've been there, so you know what this is like. When you rely on compassion and its sibling, forgiveness, for yourself or for someone else, you're opening up the possibility of a different type of resolution. Holding on to grudges or resentment ultimately hurts you more than it hurts the other person. So stay safe, keep yourself out of dangerous situations that are traumatic or threatening. Surround yourself with folks who genuinely care about you, understand ADHD, and who are willing to help you make amends. Because one of the problems with anger is that you say you're sorry and then you do the same thing again. How are you going to make a change? What tip or tool or nudge or cue do you need from the other person that would be useful to you? And how are you going to practice mutual respect? Because making amends is all about a way to move forward that works. Your son tears up the drawing that your daughter's doing because it's actually better than what he can do. She's hysterical. What's the making of amends? Maybe they draw together. Maybe he reads a story every night, for a week. Figure it out with them and for them. If they're not, for them when I mean like brainstorm and organize the situation. Mish, when my 8-year-old gets angry, sometimes he'll stop and step away to calm himself. But often we can't count. Well, that's really good. First of all, that's great. And it escalates when we can't talk him down, where he says hurtful things or destroys things. How do we help him pause before he crosses the point of no return? And once he's there raging, how do we get him to move towards calming down? Okay, so this is a great question. So I am very curious about how he's able to stop himself and step away to calm down in those moments when he does. What is happening that he's able to do that? And I'd like to write those things down and put them up on the kitchen refrigerator and in the bedroom. Then I would want to ask him, when you're revving up, What can we say that will help you make this choice to calm yourself down? Again, I feel like when kids are hurting, where saying hurtful things is something that is a separate category from destroying things. Physical destruction requires a really clear consequence right away. Because if you're hurting other people or you're hurting the house, then that's a different category than saying mean things, which is something that we can work on. Kids who are actually physically out of control and doing damage, you must speak with their provider about what's going on and work with a therapist to deal with behavioral interventions directly that will manage that kind of destructive behavior. I'm not sure how else more clearly to say that. When kids are saying mean things, that's a different issue, because that's a step down from destroying things. So we want to get rid of the destruction and the physical hurt, the harm, and then we can get into the language. And I think in both cases, particularly with the language, we want to use incentives. And we can incentivize kids with the physical stuff. But I think once they're that far gone, you need other tools. And I think that you need tools that are specific to your situation, which I can't offer because I don't know what your situation is. But I think it's really important to basically get the help that you need and to set up some agreements in the family about what we do and don't do and the consequence when this happens, what will um, occur next. Um, in terms of language, I really encourage you to help kids by monitoring them with, is that your take back for the day? You know, that we don't speak like that in our family, so you're not going to earn 15 extra minutes of phone time today, because phone is a source of communication, and when you talk to me that way, you don't earn that. Donna, my 13-year-old son has started threatening me, picking up stuff like he's going to hit me, calling me old psychopath and old hag. Calling me psychopath and old hag. So I think in this kind of situation, I would sit down with him when he's not threatening you and talk about those moments. What I would say is, like, how do you feel during those moments? What's going on? What could you do differently? Because it's not acceptable to talk to me that way. When 13-year-olds are talking to their parents that way, there's a lot of stuff going on. One, they're testing limits to see how far they can go, what the boundary is. Two, they may be trying to get a rise out of you because they're uncomfortable. And if you're upset, then they don't have to focus on their upset. They can just react to you. So we want to get a sense of what's going on. He may also be hearing kids at school talk about how they talk about their parents that way. And so maybe trying out if that language is language that he feels comfortable with. So I would really, in a calm moment or when you're in the car or something, and say, I think we need to talk about some of that language because it's not okay, and what we're going to do when you're using that language. Thanks, Ed Lester, for saying that. You don't always see it coming. That's right. You don't. Your cognition is behind the reaction of your amygdala. Your amygdala reacts much faster than your thinking brain. That's why if you can steer your car if you see another car coming, or you jump back out of the street if a bicyclist is zooming by so you don't get hit. It's faster than your thinking brain, which is why we have to pay attention to our body. Okay. Michelle asks, how do you distinguish between if it's ADHD associated anger or ODD? So oppositional defiant disorder is a different diagnosis from ADHD associated anger. Often they travel together about 40% of the time. Oppositional defiant disorder is a persistent and consistent demonstration of inappropriate physical actions, as well as some words of anger that do not respond to sort of what you would consider to be reasonable interventions. If you suspect that a child has ODD, then I really encourage you to talk to your physician or your provider about it, um, because you want to get as much information as possible, and see someone who understands what oppositional defiant disorder is all about. Research has found that when you treat oppositional defiant disorder with medication and family counseling, it usually, kind of dissipates and ultimately disappears within 2 years. So oppositional defiant disorder is not really responsive to one-on-one psychotherapy. It's really, you've got to do the family work, but it does respond to cognitive behavioral therapy. Rainy, my 10-year-old has taken to calling me a fucking whore and even worse. So that kind of language is not okay. And I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I think that in those situations, you need to like step back on the privileges that are given to your kids, and they have to be earned by treating you in a way that feels respectful and appropriate. So maybe there's no screens, and those screens are earned with um, you know, with not calling you that stuff. So for every, you get a half hour, but if you want anything more than that, then, you're going to have an afternoon from school where you don't call me an effing whore. And even worse, like, you need to restructure your parenting, because that is not okay. I'd also, again, suggest that you talk to whoever the provider is about adjusting their medication. Donified. My 12-year-old is extremely talented in drawing and is always very angry and extremely resistant to direction. Please help me with this. Um, well, I guess I'm wondering, if you've talked to your 12-year-old about what's making her angry. There's a couple factors that I would think of right off the bat, which would be, one would be puberty. Two would be trying to figure out who she is separate from you and any other parents in the family. And three might be something that she's experiencing with her friends or at school. So let's try to understand what the anger is about. And also, again, you can talk to her about how we treat each other in the family. And, you can't make her be less angry towards you, but you can change how you respond to the anger. And how you can respond differently is to say, that sounds like you're angry. Do you want to talk about it? No. Okay, I'm here if you do. Or, it sounds like you're angry, and it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to call me an effing whore. So that's not how we work in this family, and that means that you won't earn this. Okay, Catherine. Working on connecting first, correcting later is beneficial. Yes, I also like the Connected Parenting podcast. So I often feel like my 5 C's is the 5 C's of connection, because what we're trying to do is connect. When kids are angry, they often feel like they are not understood. No one understands them. And sometimes kids with ADHD have gotten this message: no one really understands me, and I'm not okay. So it's hard to stay attuned with a child who is, throwing all kinds of garbage at you. What I want you to do in that moment, try to do, is to zoom out and comment on the process rather than the content. It looks like you're really upset. Do you want to talk about what's going on? Or, I can tell that you're really upset, but we can't really do anything about that right now while you're so angry. So let's take time apart, and we'll come back together a little bit later when things have settled. What do you want to do during your time apart? Tabasco sauce in your mouth. Wow, Lynn, that's impressive. Gail, my parents don't believe in depression or anxiety either. Wow. After my mom's father became an alcoholic after her mother's death, and her brother committed suicide when his daughter and I were both 5 years old, and his wife was a nurse. Okay, so your family has a lot of trauma history, and sometimes families with trauma history are like, ugh, I made it, you can make it too. Michelle, he's like this once his medication wears off. Thank you. and he just loses control, and he does not respond to any help to calm. He does not care what he loses, etc. But he has screen time reduced or removed for this behavior. And when he is calm, I do talk to him, but I feel like he doesn't get it. He agrees it's wrong a bit, but I also feel like he doesn't care at all. He is in therapy, and therapist says he's not ready. Ready for what? And I think that if he's having this reaction when his medication wears off, then you might want to consider polytherapy, which is that stimulant and non-stimulant combination. I've seen that be very effective with some of my kids who have intense anger situations. Adolescent, things need to change right away, or I want to, or how I want it causes frustration. I must get hold of this person to see if, for example, they can pick me up. I think everything is urgent. I will call a number over and over. I need the place to be open, and I hate change too. I get all upset if it can't happen as planned. So at a Lester, I feel like mindfulness and meditation would be really helpful to assist you in developing the tools to slow down, take a breath, and go with the flow a little bit. Because you want things to be the way you are right now, and you can't always have it. So how are you going to adapt? I mean, adapting and accommodating are two essential skills for getting through life. Tara, can you talk about anger associated with RSD? Do you take a different approach on that and how to deal with that anger? I actually, we don't have much time, but I did recently write my blog actually for this week on RSD, so you can check that out. I think that anger is anger and hurt is hurt. And as far as I'm concerned, anger is the gatekeeper, and then behind it we have hurt, disappointment, sadness, fear, a certain kind of frustration or shame. And so we want to kind of get behind the anger, because once we can get behind the anger, we get a sense of what's really going on and people are struggling with. Elaine, RSD is actually tearing my heart to bits. How do I stop putting my feelings on the person's situation in question? It leads to anger and impulsiveness, and me in turn rejecting people I love. I'm so tired. I'm really sorry to hear this. I think, Elaine, rejection sensitivity dysphoria is so deeply connected to social anxiety and shame. And so it almost sounds like you're holding your approval cup out for other people to fill up, and we have to fill up our own approval cups. And so other people will do what they do. It's what we tell ourselves about what they're doing and how we interpret it that hurts us. So I think when you're angry and impulsive, you're lashing out on other people the hurt that you actually feel, or the shame, or the betrayal. And it's important to really sort of figure out how to hold your feelings so that you're not taking them out on other people. Do you have someone to talk to? Do you have a journal? Do you like to draw or knit? What kinds of things allow you to be with yourself? Or how can you process the things that are going on for you or with other people? Thank you for, yes, last week's Facebook Live would be useful. Emma. Hi, Emma. Nice to see you here. My son has ODD and ADHD. Where can I find information about what medication that is used